Good evening, everyone. I am so excited to be here. This is Elizabeth Tripp. Hi there, my lovely guest. I'm just getting into my intro for you. It is so exciting that you're here, Alea. I want to just start off. Thank you so much, the listeners who are tuning in today. We are so excited to have you here on Nourish the Soul Talk radio show and podcast, where this is your time to really sit back, relax, and go on a journey of self-discovery. And to remember that as you go on this journey, to come into presence and awareness with your sacred body, this temple, because as our guest shares in my perspective, our temple, our awareness of it, it unlocks so much wisdom. The wisdom within us is here when we're aware of it. So let's get started right away with this exciting talk show. We've got Alea Lovely, and let me tell you, she is a spiritual and metaphysical advisor. Just that name sounds so powerful. She's also a philosopher, and I thought that was so cool when I was reading actually through her website, how that really stuck out for me. She's known for her deep insights and manifestation and her relatable approach. This is just so important right now. This very grounded and rooted in reality approach to spirituality. She also has a widely successful podcast called Spiritual Shit. And it's just amazing how this podcast has exploded. She's really captivated thousands of listeners with her profound wisdom and engaging storyteller. She's interviewed actually over 100 experts. So we're talking to a real expert herself. So I myself am just so excited to be in the presence of someone who knows how to interview. And she provides her audience with incredible, relatable, really amazing feedback just to help them tap into and get in touch with the wisdom within them and also manifest meaningfully. We're going to talk about an upcoming project she's revealing, and I'm so excited to get this conversation started. Thank you, Alea. Welcome, welcome. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you again.
I know. I was just thinking, we got connected in 2020, and I remember you were like, give me a second. Um, Hold on one second. You were like, give me a second. I'm in my back room just starting my podcast and I need to get set up. And I was like, okay, no problem. And it was just such a cool interview that we had back in 2020. And then your whole podcast just exploded, right?
Yeah, it did. Thank you. Yes. And also
Yeah,
thank you for the interview. I feel so honored. Like, that's really beautiful. I appreciate that.
you're so welcome. So I want to really start with, you know, I kind of reviewed your website, got in touch with your energy. You're obviously a very, very powerful channeler and intuitive. And before we get deep diving into your, upcoming project and new book release, I'm just going to drop that. I think the audience would really want to know what kind of led you to this path of being such a strong figure and light for other people, such a bearer of hope, such an advisor for other people's trepidations. How did you get here? How did you become this spiritual advisor and channel?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I think that in my early childhood, I grew up very religious, and in a
Mm,
religious context, it was very hard to hear my own voice. Often being told and taught this is how you're supposed to think, this is the right way to do something. And often having like guilt be the background of everything I was thinking, I was a very guilty child. And I was very curious as well. I had a lot of things to say and to ask. I still do. And often would see patterns in the dogmatic behaviors that were going on and thinking, like, something doesn't add up here. Something doesn't feel
mm,
right to me. And there was no space for that. There was no space for those questions. I remember being told by my Sunday school teacher, I don't have enough faith. and that if I had continued to ask questions, that I wouldn't be welcome to continue to join the youth group that I was in. And I just thought, like, if God made me this inquisitive person, then he
Mm,
should be cool with my questions. And since there was no space for that, I just often felt like a little bit lost, like it just didn't have enough space to be who I was. And what I noticed in that is that there was a lot of disempowerment of often defaulting to other people and other people's wisdom, and me just having thankfully a really strong intuition from the jump, but often denying myself that intuition, denying what my intuition was telling me, and then often seeing later, man, I was right, you know.
mm,
So those moments of having validation or affirmation later in life led me to this kind of breaking away of the church, and me feeling comfortable enough as an adult to step away from some of those things. And a few years of being an atheist where I just didn't believe in anything, and I was like, I kind of don't feel like this is it either. Like there was
mm-hmm,
one end of the spectrum where it was like, I know everything and this is what's going to happen after you die, into then transferring into like, I think I'm just as arrogant to say that there's nothing. So
mm,
I had to find like a sweet in between. In the meanwhile, I was having a lot of spiritual experiences from childhood and on, with spirits and people standing over my bed, very sixth sense kind of stuff. And then finding out that my father and my grandmother also have very similar gifts. And so it being kind of the way that it was talked about was always like, oh, no, no, this is demons trying to trick you, or, et cetera. But I was like, but grandma came through and gave me this really amazing message about like her passing and so on. So probably around 25, 27, around there, I really started to really hunker down into my awakening and knowing myself. And it's put me on this path. I'm 40 now, but
yeah,
put me on this path of saying, like, I don't really love the way that spiritually speaking, we take people's power away from them. Like, I think we
mm,
all have intuition as a birthright. And I think that we all know what's best for us deep down inside when we pull off the voices and the expectations and the inauthentic desires and what society says. And we're able to get to the crux of like who we were when we came into this world before the
mm,
trauma. And I want to give that back to people. Like, I love seeing the light turn on when people, with my coaching clients, or when people are reading my book or whatever and going, oh, yes. Like, and them getting like that snippet of their power back. Like, I love that. So,
mm,
it's guided all of my work. Like, everything that I do is always, asking questions about the systems that we are in. I'm a person of color, and seeing how I was very excluded from a lot of my experiences in the spiritual world. Me going, that doesn't also feel right either, So I've been
mm,
just kind of just tearing down Legos everywhere I go.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
but in hopes to create something foundationally that's more inclusive, something that's better for
mm,
the people who do feel left out or marginalized, who do feel like, manifestation doesn't work for me. And why is that? We know why that is. Being able to explain to them and give them answers and just little nuggets that will help themselves discover themselves authentically.
yeah. Well, what a relatable story, because I think all of us can agree that we grew up with some form or fashion of a religious influence, right?
Mm,
Where we were told, if we're not being good, quote unquote, the way that our preacher or the pastor of this particular type of organized religion is saying we should, then we're actually bad.
mm,
And then similar to me, you actually have an overlap in my own experience of seeing ghosts, we could call them, or spiritual entities or beings. And on top of that, probably not having maybe the support within our
right.
family dynamics to say this is actually a gift and it's normal, but being inundated with more of that kind of framework, or we call like blueprint of there's something wrong or
Yeah.
bad or not enough about me.
Yeah.
And I love how that's been your driving force. So, how cool is that? Because you do so much on really empowering people. And do you work just with women or is it men too?
Men too. Yeah. But it's
Okay,
mostly women. That's who's naturally drawn to me.
to you, yeah, around personal wisdom and really tapping into that intuition. And I know from personal experience, as you just shared, that you felt like own ability to listen to your intuition was denied. So I wanted to know, what do you say to people who are struggling to listen to that inner voice and they feel disconnected to their intuition? Like, what's your guidance on that? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that right now.
Yeah. So a lot of times when we're thinking about, what we want in our life, and why we can't have it. In the book, I talk about the anti-belief that gets
Yeah.
in the way of us being able to pursue our dreams or manifest what it is that we want. There's some narrative that has been there for quite some time. And what I often find in people is there is an age where I've always been like that started. And
Mm,
it's kind of like tracking back to those areas or arenas where, like, we at a former childhood self, teenager self, or something, gripped onto a narrative and
mm-hmm.
said, okay, this is how I stay safe in the world. There's not space in my home for me to be emotional. So I quiet my voice. There's not a safe space for me to express myself. Or a parent that's emotionally neglectful. So you just learn how to do everything yourself. And you've told yourself that I have to do everything myself. I can't ask for help or
Yeah.
have a traumatic experience, like myself. I've been SA'd and me telling myself that my body is problematic. And so I don't want to be an attractive body because that means I'll be unsafe. Different
Mm,
things like that, where we kind of anchor into a particular narrative that keeps us from seeing our own magic, seeing our own, like, this is what I want to do with my life. A lot of times those narratives come from safety programming. What can we
mm.
do to keep ourselves safe? And often because we're trying to keep ourselves safe, like, it gets in the way of us being able to see what our authentic desire actually is.
Really beautifully said. And, just giving you a heads up, we're going to head into a quick break. But before we do that, we're going to introduce actually the title of your book, which is Meaningful Manifestation. And you really express there how, in that, you talk about these narratives that people come up with that actually separate them from their truth and really being able to kind of listen to themselves. So, how cool to prime us and prep for our next segment for us to really hear a little bit more about this exciting book launch. Congratulations,
Thank
by the
you.
way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we're going to actually take a quick break. And when we get back, we'll dive back in.
Are you a conscious co creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high achieving, growth oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Broncu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
If you don't have your health, what do you really have? It's time to feel good in your body and shift from struggle to ease. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul, where we explore the sacred wisdom of your body while you sit back, relax, and go on a journey of self-discovery. Join me every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to awaken your heart, transform your well-being, and unlock a deeper understanding of yourself.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
All right, welcome back. All right, and welcome back. I'm just so excited. I forgot my intro music had to play. I love it when you just go live and things just happen. It's like
Surprise.
the universe is like, here we go. So I'm here talking to Alea Lovely. She is an amazing woman, a very empowered woman who, by the way, has a top-ranked podcast called Spiritual Shit. And let me tell you, this woman, she is able to really hold such a powerful conversation. She's had interviews with thought leaders like Matt Kahn, Mel Robbins, and Thelma. I mean, congratulations. That's
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you.
And
Appreciate
this all just happened over the last like 4 years, right?
it. Yeah, yeah. We've grown a lot. I'm really proud of the work that we've done so far and looking forward to how that's going to shape up soon.
Yeah. Well, Aaliyah, tell us about meaningful manifestations. We were just talking about, how do we help people who are kind of in this space right now who they want to, trust in something bigger. They want to realize that they have a wisdom within them, but they don't even really feel like it's possible because they're doubting their own truth, their own inner self. So tell us how meaningful manifestation can help them, or how even this journey began to write this book too. So maybe you can answer
Yeah.
both of these questions in this segment.
So it kicked off with the passing of my aunt. It was extremely sudden. And when she passed, she's 50 something years old. And the thought I couldn't shake was, did she have a good life?
Mm,
And what did that mean to her? And I couldn't kick it. I just kept ruminating of like, what does it mean to live a good life? And I've always been someone really interested in spiritual things and near death experiences and whatever, when people see the other side. And since I do mediumship work, it's very important to me. And thinking about the things that people say when they come through,
yeah.
often wanting to connect with loved ones, mend relationships, and recognizing that love is kind of the center of why we're here and what's most important to us when we pass. So I started looking at these studies of end of life studies where people are like, this, I regret not being my most authentic self. I regret not, saying that thing to that person that I loved, or
Mm,
start my painting career, or whatever the thing was, things that were really like non-negotiables for their soul, but they didn't feel like they could do because, like their family wanted them to be a doctor, or they had a husband that didn't approve of them working outside of the home, or whatever the thing was, right? And I thought, oh, well, okay, let me map out what that looks like. If I were to get to the end of my life, I don't want to have the best life. I mean, that would be fantastic, but like life be life. And so I was like, what would it mean for me to have a good life? Like if I were to
mm,
pass away tomorrow, would I feel satisfied? Would I feel sated in the life that I had? And for
mm,
me, those turned out being very simple things like having a love romantic partner that time with my family, financial security, not even like financial abundance, just security, being able to be comfortable, having passions achieved, being able to travel and have my inspirations sated, like things that feel very straightforward and basic. And I was like, okay,
yeah.
so I don't need like a million followers. I don't need to have necessarily, I would love it, a New York Times bestselling book. Like there are
Mm-hmm.
things that I put on this list that I say, this is what's going to make me happy, only to find out that it doesn't actually make you happy. And unfortunately, in our society, especially with capitalism, we are so bent on the next thing. Like, what do we need to do
Mm-hmm.
next? Okay, I got this thing. Now, what are you doing next? I used to live in New York, and that would always be the question of like, so what are you working on next? And it's like, I just finished something really big. Like, can we just ruminate on that a little bit first before I feel the pressure that I need to get up and do something else? And that feeling very challenging to me because I was like, I don't feel fulfilled in constantly blooming. Like,
Mm-hmm.
flowers don't bloom year round. Why must I? So
Mm.
I sat down and I was like, all right, I need these 5 things to have a good life. And from there, I actually channeled it. I channeled the Imagine method. I sat down on a road trip and it was just starting to like, I get this little bubbly feeling when I'm And I channeled the Imagine method, which is which is inception. Where are you starting from? Your starting place is going to be different than so-and-so starting place. If you are in New York and I'm in Kansas City and we're both trying to get to LA, I'm going to get there first. And are you going to be halfway through middle of America going like, why did she get there before me? And it's like, well, I had the privilege of being closer to LA. And there are a lot of things that we see in our life that are exactly like that, where it's like,
Mm,
okay, you have a different skin color. So you are going to get these advantages that I might not get in this country, or you make more money, or you don't make more money, or you live in a war-torn country, whatever the thing is. And it wouldn't be because weren't positive enough, you know?
mm,
And when we think about
mhm,
manifestation, oftentimes people are talking about our thought life, which is true. Like being able
mhm,
to be positive and have perspective and perception helps you see better what is fit for your life, what's going to be a better fit for your life. However, like it's not the only thing. I
mhm,
think there was some
mhm,
truth in The Secret when it came out, but
mhm,
it left out a lot that people needed to hear instead of just policing their thoughts. So
mhm,
the next is M, which is manifestation. What do you want? You would be surprised how many clients I work with that don't actually know what they want. And they are
mm,
fighting with inauthentic desires versus their authentic desires. What society says I should be doing or how much I should be making or, what's successful to them. And I'm not ultimately happy at the end of the day when I get those things. And
mhm,
then, versus like what would actually make me happy. Like for some people, it might be a tiny house in the woods. And that's so counterculture to like what we're told is supposed to be the dream, the penthouse, or whatever, the Ferrari and so on. So then you get into the anti-belief, like I can have this thing, but I can't because. I'd like to have this thing, but I can't because. And whatever
mm,
narrative we're holding on to. And some of those narratives are very real. Like some of them are like, okay, I can't get a bank loan because I don't make enough money and da da da. But it's like you don't make enough money right now
mhm,
that it's not available to you at all? And do you give up because you can't see further down the line what might be possible for you? A good example for you is this book. This is not my first book, this is my third book. And I
mm,
self published two books before this that absolutely completely flopped. And I kept saying
mm.
to myself, I want to be a writer. I want to be an author. I have things to say.
Yeah.
Nobody would take my books. Nobody would take the pitches. Nobody would take the proposals. And then 15 years later, from my first book, someone enters my DMs and says, would you like to collaborate on my book? Hell yeah. you know,
Mhm,
and at
mhm,
that point, it was still a desire. I didn't give up on that desire. And there's a difference between like allowing the universe to bring it to you, universe, what do you have for me, versus being in defeat and saying like, all right, well, I'm done with that.
mm,
That will never happen because we're trying to protect ourselves from disappointment and from hope, honestly, because it takes energy to hope. It can be draining.
mm,
So sometimes we're just not vulnerable enough to be able to let ourselves hope. So then you go into growth. What behaviors need to change in order for me to actually like put those things in play? Like what steps do I need to do? How could I see the end of this tunnel? These are the practical ways. This is an ongoing process too. So you don't get to the
mhm.
G and then just you're done. It's definitely something that you keep going through and refining
Yeah.
to the integration process, which is when you really start to feel that growth actually happen. So a good example of this is like I've always struggled with my weight and some early imprints from my mother who also struggled with her weight. She told me when I was 5, um, I'm so sorry you got my body type. You're always going to struggle with your weight. And I'm 5, and I'm thinking, from her own hurt and what she's experienced in her own life, she thought, she's apologizing for something. And you just never know with kids what's going to stick. That stuck with me. And
Mm,
so I had that already programming. Then I went through the Christian church. Your body's problematic. You're developing too early. You're going to make your brother stumble. And suddenly now my body's a problem for other people. And then being in college, where then I was, trigger warning, kidnapped by a football player who went to my
wow.
school, and some things happened that should not have happened, should have never happened. And coming back from that experience and learning that I'm not safe in the body that I'm in. Well,
Mm,
what do? I eat to protect that, to protect me from the
mm,
outside so I don't feel attractive to other people. And so through that experience, I'm going through this growth issue where I'm going, you're lazy, you don't work out enough, you don't do this, you don't do that, and hating myself because I can't seem to get over this hump, thinking that I'm not what I want to manifest is a size 6 body. And my anti-belief is I can't do it because I'm too lazy or I have hormone issues or whatever the thing is. Then getting into the growth point of going, the actionable steps would look like this, but the actual integration being, wow, I realized that it's not that I'm lazy and that I'm disappointing myself. It is that I am more afraid of men than having a fat body, than having death due to bad health. I would prefer, this is how my psyche stays safe. And then in that integration process, get to say, now, what do you want to do with that? Like you can continue to stay safe. You can find a compromise. You can actually override that programming if you're aware of it. And my compromise was I would like to be strong. So now I can like press 550 pounds. And I feel good about that. Like nobody's knocking
Wow.
me over, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel safe and I feel strong. And that's the type of messaging I want to give to my daughter. It's like you don't need to be smaller to fit into this world. You can be strong. So
Yeah.
that was my integration process. Then you go to noticing, which is the process of being able to see the synchronicities that happen that are trying to get you to that manifestation that you want, noticing your thought patterns changing, the angel numbers, how little opportunities start to sprinkle in. You're trying to manifest a partner and suddenly you start getting attention from people and you're like, oh my God, it must be him. It must be the one. And when it doesn't work out, it's like, oh, no, that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. It means that you opened something inside of yourself that said, look, you're going in the right direction. We're showing you you're going in the right direction. So if you can cultivate that noticing, you can be more patient through the process of what the universe is trying to get you and or give you. And so like to me, like when I was trying to manifest a partner, I remember being in Bali in Shavasana, recognizing that at 9 years old, I decided I have to do everything by myself and that there was no space for a man or a partner to come into my life because I was the one doing everything. So when I noticed that, I was like, I'm ready to release this ideal or this narrative that I have to do everything by myself, that I am open and trusting enough to allow someone else to come into my life and have an actual partner. And when I did that, what then started happening is suddenly I was noticeable to other people, which I'd never been. And
Yeah.
suddenly, I'm getting stopped at it. Like there was a guy at the airport that stopped and was like, are you an earth angel? And I'm like, what kind of like line is this? Like earth angel.
Yeah.
Okay. Like stop blowing smoke up my ass. So
Yeah.
he comes to me and he's like, no, like I can recognize your aura. Anyway, I go to Paris. That's where I was on the flight. And I get there, and then this, London guy comes up to me and he's like, oh, hey, babes, where are you headed? Da, da, da. And it was just like, I mean, and nice people, like good, nice people. They didn't end up being the one, but it started to show me that, like, oh, wait, I'm getting close. Something's
Yeah.
happening. The thing is tipping. I'm shifting into the frequency of the thing I'm trying to call in. And 3 months later, I meet my husband. So it was very clear.
Wow.
Like once I started to notice the pattern, I'm like, I'm on to something. Something is
Yeah.
happening. Instead of taking it as disappointment that it didn't work out, it was like, the door is being opened. Okay, we're here. So then you
Yeah.
get into E, which is expansion.
Yeah. And let me pause you there because we're going to take a quick break and
Yeah.
I want to hear about expansion, but wow, holy cow, you have an amazing formula here. So, Alea, let's take a break. And everybody, when we get back, we're going to hear about the expansion part. All right. We'll be back in a few.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Hi, I'm Linda Marcanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back. This is Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul. We're talking to Alea Lovely, and we were just diving into her Imagine method in her new book, Meaningful Manifestations. Alea, tell us about the E, right? This is the expansion part of the book, and we really want to know about what happens here.
Yeah. So the expansion part might be the most fun because it's when you finally get the thing that you want.
That is fun.
Super fun. It's like, oh, great. The problem often is that we don't stay here long enough to
Yeah.
enjoy, to have gratitude over what we've worked so hard for and what has finally come into our awareness, into our existence. And even if we do take some time to like really sit with it, what we have called into our life ends up ultimately leveling us up and helping
Mm,
us expand. And I don't think a lot of people talk about what happens when you get the thing that you want and then you realize it doesn't make you happy. It's like, oh, I
mm,
really did want this thing. And this thing is really great. It's really amazing. But ultimately, like happiness is an inside job. Happiness
mm,
is something that is like, if I'm not manifesting things that are meaningful, they feel flat. Like it's like,
mm-hmm,
oh, I really wanted to get this material item and you get it finally. And it's like, oh, well, it only that little like
mm-hmm.
sparkle lasts for just, a moment. But even the meaningful things that you wanted to manifest, like I manifested my partner, my podcast and my job taking off, a baby where my doctor said like it was impossible to be able to get pregnant for me.
Wow.
And just in a house during a pandemic, like so many things that I manifested, not just any house, by the way. I have to tell the story. I
Yeah.
used to live down the street. And I used to drive by this house on my way to work. And I lived in a 2 bedroom, it was a very small house, $90,000. Like I was really proud
Yeah.
of myself when I was 20 something. I bought a $90,000 house and it needed a lot of work. But I would drive by this house on the way to work and go, wow, what would it be to live in a house like that? That would be so amazing. And so on. And so, anyway, we were during the pandemic looking for a house. I was pregnant and I had a dream about a house with a red roof. And I didn't, we found a house, but it didn't have a red roof. And I remember thinking like, oh, it doesn't have the red roof. But right before we closed, they had a huge, massive sewage break. And that would be like 40 grand to fix. And they were like, you're welcome to walk away from this house at this point. And I felt so upset about it because we worked for 4 months to try to get this house. And so the day that I let it go, I said, you know what, I'm just going to surrender. Like, universe, you know what you're doing. This day, this house came on the market and I saw it and it has a red roof. And I was like, why does the house look so familiar to me? And I look at the address and I'm like, no way. 15 something years ago, I used to drive by every day and wonder what it looked like.
Wow.
So we got there and there was a man who was, usually when you go to look at a house, the owner's not there, but for whatever reason, the owner was there. And, when we went in and talked to him and met him and just talking about how much this house was perfect for us, et cetera. And even though they got a bunch of offers over asking price, he said, I want that couple to have it, like the couple with the couple kids and the pregnant lady. I want them to have it. And I felt chosen, and I was like, I knew it. I knew this. We manifested it. So that feeling. So, we moved into this house. I absolutely love our house, but the house always needs work. There's always something to be doing. I was literally like right before we started this interview, I had to take down all of the plastic wrap that's sitting to my left because we're painting the ceiling. Just, like water stuff, whatever. Like so much work that has to go into this house. So there are these moments where it's like, I'm incredibly grateful that we bought at a time right before the market went crazy, that we had a place for my child to have her memories, that everybody's got their own space and own bedroom. And I feel really, really grateful to have all of those things. And I still go, you know what? If we ever buy another house, I'll get a smaller house. Like it's a lot to clean. It's a lot to do here. It's a lot to do. Maybe in a better neighborhood. Maybe the fence should be fenced in. We might stay in this house forever. I don't know. But there being these like changes or refinements essentially that once you get the thing that you've expanded into going, okay, now that I know this is something that I might ask for the next time because to me, manifestation is just a process of knowing self. It's
Right.
you getting to know yourself. Like, what does it mean to know yourself? And so I think that this process is number one. I mean, I'm biased. I wrote the book, so I think it's really good. But I use it with a lot of my clients, and I can just see those light bulbs go on because you're going through each thing that you want and being able to work out very just step by step what's either stopping you, what's in the way, what you haven't noticed, what you feel grateful for, what you don't, and how that teaches you more about who you are and what you actually want. And so you might have spent half your lifetime trying to manifest things you don't actually want, only to get to a place where it feels like you're starting all over and saying like, who do I want to be this iteration?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, because we all have this ability to create, right? And when we have the awareness to be able to follow a process to create intentionally and then also, grow through the iterations of our life, the new kind of experiences we come into, we can refine and come into a more kind of aligned, what I hear you saying, an aligned process of you know, being intentional about how we create and how it evolves through
Right.
our ability to manifest. So, you just said so many amazing things from the beginning of this segment to the last one. And something I just wanted to touch point on, which I think really ties into what you've created, and you can, you can soundboard back to me if I'm hearing this correctly, that in the Imagine method in your book, in Meaningful Manifestation, it's really about coming away from maybe the hard work that people attach to manifestation. Like, in The Secret, I think a lot of people misunderstood it as like something that had to be repeated and methodical and focused on, and really kind of from a fear base of when will this happen, and all this prayer will make it work, so this force will bring it forward. That kind of created a culture where people maybe without awareness really have been manifesting out of this more lack consciousness than truly from an abundance place within themselves, where just getting to know themselves better, clearing out the narrative, right? Really saying, okay, this is what I want. Okay, what is it that I'm really telling myself, or what experience did I have that really separates me from this? And how can I grow into the person that I know I need to be in order to have this, and go through that integration and then see these synchronicities? This is what I'm
Right.
hearing you did. So,
Yeah. And I mean, absolutely. The thing is like when we think about what we're trying to manifest, oftentimes when we fear something's not coming, we hyper
yeah,
on what can I do? What can I do? Can I do? But when we're in a
yeah.
place where we're in like, I am in sovereign awareness that like the universe is going to provide what it is that I need, and I'm not going to freak out
Mm,
about it. Like, obviously, there are actionable steps that need to be had and need to be done, but there are also places where it's like, all right, like it's kind of out of my hands. Like the house situation, like, all right, we had to take a L when it came to the house. And it's like, all right, universe, you're supposed to know what you're doing. Show me.
yeah,
Show me
yeah,
you know
yeah.
what you're doing. And then us being able to get the house in that way. And it was like the book, deal, my partner, all of those things. There was always this massive surrender point where it was like, I'm trying, and nothing's working. So I finally
Mm,
took a breath and said, all right, universe, what do you have for me? And that's when it finally
mm,
changed.
yeah. And I know you're a mommy, and that's so exciting. And I love that. And actually, I feel like the audience could really use, for those people, hi, who are, in maybe this kind of older, we'll say, age frame according to mainstream medical, practitioners that say, oh, you can't get pregnant, or, this isn't possible. How would someone like yourself, advise someone spiritually using the method that maybe you've created, if you'd like to integrate this into your book, someone who may be in that position or space, a woman who may be just struggling with that right now?
Can you repeat the question as my toddler was yelling at me?
So I know a lot of women, who are in this like kind of the medical mainstream would say like older age bracket. They would even
Yeah.
call them like, what's it called? It's like a term.
Geriatric.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
and there's this inundation, and you talk about this in the beginning of the show of like a cultural kind of indoctrination of,
Mhm.
how we perceive ourselves as an older
Yeah.
woman,
Yeah.
quote unquote, from the medical perspective. How do we help women break through that? Because maybe they didn't need a partner till later in life, or,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe career took precedence, or, maybe that
Yeah.
they truly felt the calling a little bit older than they did in their mid 30s, because
Yeah.
things are totally different than they were 10 or 15 years ago, or even 20. So my
Yeah.
question is using your method, imagine method, or just giving an example, maybe just advising women in this space, because I know they're in watching this. What would you tell them? How would you guide them to shift their vibration to manifest this?
I think for me, it was really difficult because the aspect of our patriarchy that we live within is so focused on like youth. Like you have to be young enough to do this. You're going to miss out on everything. Your biological clock is ticking. You may have, no trouble conceiving. You might have a lot of trouble conceiving. You could have trouble conceiving when you're 20, like
Mm,
versus when you're 40. Like there are lots of things. There's so many varieties and factors that can play a role in that. But this message of like you're running out of time. Like, that
mm.
meme that's going around right now is like, you have 30 minutes, and they're like 30 minutes. And it's like, I feel like that we're always telling women, like, you don't have enough time, you're behind, you don't know who you are, figure it out. And it's like there's so much life to be lived. And like, especially, okay, go potty, sweetie. The reality of having a toddler. My husband just went to work. So, okay, go.
It is
But
amazing.
thank you. But that feeling of like, I don't have any control. I don't know what to do. And so being able to give that back to yourself as far as your power and say, like, I'm not running out of time. I'm exactly where I need to be. And because fertility is it's such a like tough topic, right? It's so fraught with a lot of emotions. I'm not enough. My body should be doing something and it can't, or whatever. It's like, oh, do I have to choose between this and my career? I was very astute on knowing that I was not choosing between the two. If it had to come down to
Mm,
it, I was going to pick my career because like, well, I'm my oldest daughter, so that might have something to do with it. But I was married beforehand, and I was very sure I did not want to have children with him because I did not want to have to parent alone, and I knew that that was a part of the journey.
mm,
So
mhm.
when I met David, my husband, I was like, I knew I wanted to have a child with him. Put a baby in me now. Like
Wow.
he's such a fantastic person and father. And so I was very aware that I was like, okay, this feels like the right time, but not because I was rushing into it, not because I was like, I absolutely need to do this right now or I'm going to miss my chance. That to me is scarcity mentality. And unfortunately,
Mm,
it's very real. It
yep.
feels very real, but like, if and I know this sounds like very reductive, but if it's not meant for you, like if it's meant for you, it won't miss you. If it's meant for
Yeah.
you, it won't miss you.
Well,
Um,
listen, Aaliyah, let's take a quick break. And then when we get back, we'll keep diving into this particular subject here and even hearing a little bit more. And I love that. It's meant for you, it won't miss you. So we'll take a few minute break, okay?
Are you a high achieving, growth oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Broncu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back. This is the beauty of a live show. I've always loved this. And I forgot to tell you, I lived in New York for 12 years.
Oh,
So
you
I
know how it
know
is.
what it means. Yeah, I know what it means. And this is a New York City base station. So this is going out to all of our friends and family and everybody we know in New York City. But I'm talking with Alea Lovely, and she is launching this November her new book, Meaningful Manifestations. And essentially, the book addresses the gaps that other manifestation books gloss over. And she really has this beautiful framework that was channeled. Aaliyah is a very powerful channel and gifted channel called the Imagine Method. And I was just curious with you, because your beautiful baby girl was right there. And, I know there's a lot of women, and we were just talking about this, that struggle with conception or are coming into that space where they're a little older. And you were just sharing your advice. What is meant for you will, what did you say? It was actually quite unique. If it's meant for you,
Will not miss you.
it will not miss you.
And
Yeah.
I wish I could take credit for that quote. Like, it's something that I've seen run around quite a bit. I might have said it that way particularly, but it's a strong tenet in the way that I live my life, because if it is a desire of yours, like that's where the Imagine method comes in, is vetting those desires. Why do I want that particular thing? Just to give you some very raw insight, my daughter came in here, you heard her say, I have to go potty, and then she threw up in my hand. So that's real fun. And being a working mom, like, I'm sure people can relate. So, um,
Yeah.
just knowing the avenues and the challenges that come with that. And, I have a few friends who've gone through really, really intense fertility journeys to get to the end and not have produced a baby. Some that got to the end and have produced a baby. So it really, to me, is very, very independent. And that is why I don't think that the law of attraction is a law. It's a
Mm,
principle, because it doesn't work the same
mhm.
for everybody. You can't think yourself positively enough out of, your diagnosis or out of, something that's happened to you. However, I do think that the
Mm,
soul is on a very strong journey towards the growth of what, and that's my own particular belief of what your soul wants to learn. And
yeah.
so that might be a process of surrender. That might be, learning how to be free in your own life. My friend who really struggled with her journey, 12 years and no baby. And,
Mm,
now she lives in Phoenix. She's a fantastic person, by the way. She's just like the most amazing, most inspiring person you'd ever meet. But, and she's living this life according to her own means. She gets to do whatever she wants. And I'm
yeah.
like, girl, you call me anytime you want to hear kids crying and, like the whole bit.
Yeah.
And her finding a different perspective, because she was raised in a Christian household where everybody had 12 kids.
Mm,
Everybody had, like her brother-in-law is, I don't know, 14 kids or something crazy. Like, there's the family massive, right? And she's the only one that doesn't have a child, but she's also the
mm,
only one that, like, asks proper questions, or what I would consider proper questions, critical thinking, and has a different perspective on the world and how to love people, and what she's able to give to people is so much greater. Like, she's able to be a
yeah.
mother to so many others, and what she teaches and the wisdom and how she inspires others. And, some people might listen to that and go, well, that's not what I want, and
Yeah.
that's why I think it's not a law.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can agree with that for sure, because I think there's a lot of, ways that other dynamics included in our soul's journey that often we could go into a mindset of, oh, why me? But really there's a greater, vaster picture unfolding. And what popped into my head was, you can channel. So when people come to you and they may have this challenge and they're asking for your spiritual advice, are you able to tap into that higher truth from their guides or their soul, and through this process give them like a unbiased kind of information that could alleviate maybe some of the suffering or pain that they're going through?
Absolutely. The thing is, though, is that because everybody's different and everybody has different level of attachments to the manifestations they're trying to draw in, sometimes the advice from their soul is not what they want to hear or they're not ready to hear.
Mm.
And sometimes
Hmm.
it can be hard. I mean, I think I'm a pretty good read on people where I'm like, like this is how we might deliver this, where it's most digestible.
Mm.
But sometimes it is tough. Like I know for myself, all I wanted was like a partner that loved me. And I signed up
Mm.
first for someone who didn't and someone who used me and left me high and dry. And, like watching all of my friends move on with their life and have their babies and have partners that were their best friends. And then we've been married for 18 years. And me being still, single and still struggling with the situationship that I can out of, it felt really unfair. It was just like, why,
Mm.
why am I the one being left out of this story? Everybody else gets to have that. And yet, here I am with the podcast and a book and doing some really phenomenal things that I may not have had the attention for and the confidence to do if I had a family I was raising at the time. So hindsight
Mm.
2020, and I get an opportunity to get to see that the older I get, the clearer it gets. But getting to see more and more that like I feel personally that the universe does have my best interest in mind, but at the same time looking around the world and going, I mean, goodness gracious. Like, I'm lucky that I'm living in America where I have access to clean water and food. Does the universe not have the best in mind for the people that are living overseas? And having
Mm.
questions, those curiosities, or the people that can't pay their rent or who live in abusive children who grow up in abusive household, things like that, where I'm like, the world
Mm.
isn't fair. And it would
Mm.
be naive to kind of approach it in that way. And not for the person
Mm.
necessarily, but especially the responsibility as a teacher. Like when we
Mm.
come from that perspective of everything shakes out and everything happens for a reason, it's a little gaslighty to people who really have had it hard. And
Mm.
so we need to recognize, at least from me and my own beliefs, and you can throw this away if you don't believe that, but I do think that my soul has signed up for certain lessons and for certain awarenesses and things that other souls have not. And in that, it can be really difficult to see where's my stuff? Why isn't this fair? Um, I think we are going through collective manifestations as well as a humanity. And we have, in some ways, chosen different roles and, what that looks like. Like, why did I come into a body of versus, being someone who's white? And,
Yeah.
granted, things would be a lot easier if I was, I think. And at the same time, there's so many advantages to the hardship that I've experienced that has given me massive. I don't have a problem with standing out, wearing whatever I want, like having the tattoos, and I'm gonna go paint now. I'm gonna be an artist now. And people are like, how do you do that? That's crazy. You just post it
Mm-hmm.
online. And I'm like, because I've never fit in to begin with. All the schools I went to,
Mm.
I was always ostracized. So like who's gonna like make me feel afraid now? You know?
Mm.
I've always had
Mm-hmm.
that. And I have some friends who have always fit in, who have always been the popular ones, and they have this crippling fear of being
Mm.
themselves. I don't have,
Yeah.
so like it does shake out in some ways, but it's sometimes really difficult to see that perspective when you're going through it.
Oh, absolutely. And I can and share in your, your sentiment of, recognizing some our higher self chooses things that often our own mind cannot even comprehend because, in this world that we're in, the pain and suffering and the things that we go through and the challenges that we face, they just are very real.
Mm,
And often giving that as an antidote to relieve it is just not satisfying. And that, really we do have to hold that space of compassion and be able to allow people to express what it is that they're going through in their own way, because that's truly how pain gets let out. That's how things start to resolve too, when we
yeah.
can have that space and that voice. So listen, we're about to kind of come to the end. Can you believe it? The show goes by so fast.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, how are the ways that people can get a copy of your book and also get connected with you? Um, and then once you answer that, I have one more question for you.
Wonderful. You can find everything at thelovelyalia.com, ALEA.com. If you want to get the book, go /book. You want to get my services /services. You want to find me on Instagram at thelovelyalia. The book is being sold wherever books are sold.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, so if you could give humanity your advice about what is the purpose of being here right now on this planet, what would you say? What's the purpose of being here right now?
Love. To
Hmm.
love oneself, to love others, to learn how to love others. We are marching into a very tumultuous week next week. And we
Mm,
just like employ you to march into that with love, to be kind to your neighbor, whatever you believe. Like, we are not leading the world or the charge with hate. It does not work. It does
mm,
not work for our souls. It does not work for our goals. Like, how can we hold compassion for people that are different than us, that believe differently than us? That is what we're here. Like, how can we purify the soul in the way that we treat each other? Love.
mm. Be beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Alea Lovely, for being here tonight on this podcast.
You.
Meaningful manifestations. You guys get a copy. I'm dropping the link in all of my live links and as well as on Spotify and Amazon and iTunes and Stitcher, all the major podcasting platforms. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this amazing community, Nourish the Soul podcast talk radio show. Until we see you all next, namaste. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just in a minute.